Hello everyone, how are we doing? Let's see if this works because, well, I have a small theory about the quality of YouTube at the moment and what it's to do with, but we'll leave that to one side. Hello everyone, we are here for Nelson's, Dunkerques, Tones and Battles. As per by BJTouron, when is concentrating the entire main armament forward a good idea? And not so a good idea. I'm, of course, going to be your guest historian and host of the evening, Dr. Alexander Clarke, and I am joined by, well, some maple pancakes and iron brew. But hey ho, it does for the company. It keeps sleeting here, and trying to explain to the fluffy research assistants they could come out and keep me company outside, versus stay inside with the warm central heating, has for some reason not proved an effective or persuasive argument. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Peter Dawson. Hello, Rick Lasawa. Hello, BJTouron. Hello, Andrew Paul. John. Ooh. Hello, Dunkerques Ironhammer. Hello, Connor and Cameron. Did you see HMS Diamond is not able to sail on time due to a technical difficulty? What are the odds it's the engines? Again, I'll refer you to my father, who said that these engines were going to be very good, but if you were going to run them all the time at full power, you were going to need to have 3 of them. And of course, everyone said, no, 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 we won't need to run them at full power all the time because, you know, the world's going to be peaceful. I'm fairly sure wherever he's looking down from, because I'm hoping he made it to heaven, he's having a good giggle right now. Hello, Calvin Gusberg. Hello, Albazaski. Hello, Knight6831. Hello, Paul Beswick. Hi, Dr. Did you see the tweet regarding the Russian-owned yacht searched by the Norwegian Coast Guard? Appears to be the culprit behind the cutting of the Svalbard fiber optic cables. Interesting. Hello, Not a Wolf. Antana Verka. Hello. Lots of interesting things going on. Hopefully, I have something reassuring to start with given today. We're recording bilge pumps again for next week's episode on Monday. We're recording again on Monday. So it's going to be Monday and it's going to be up on Wednesday as it normally is. And we've got Wilf Owen back, who you must remember is, of course, our land warfare, the land warfare expert par excellence. Unlike those people who've magically turned from counterinsurgency to Russian maneuver warfare specialist, he actually is a maneuver warfare specialist, and we're going to have him on to discuss the realities of of expeditionary warfare. Hello, DG40. Hello, John Barrow. Glad you can hear you. Hello, Janoth. Hello, Samuel Spratt. Hello, MC Legend 13H. Hello, Ian Carr. Hello, DH89. Hello, Seneca Nero. Hello, Zachary Gherkin. Hello, Phil Williams. Hello, everyone. Hello, Andrew Mend. John Barron, good. Shorter Citadel. Bad, obvious target. Well, you'll be glad to know you're going to enjoy the long patrol for this has already been recorded and is suitably UAD infused. Yes, I did get to have a long game with Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts to go. Woohoo! And basically show you some of the fun points of this. And I've recorded a fair number of videos in advance through March. So you'll definitely be getting some long patrols. Mm. Hello, Martini Henry. And Seneknira, UAD has a problem. Developers are Ukrainian and just managed to upload a test branch. Not beta, just test. Well, I hope wherever they are well and safe. Nigerian, is it fair to call N3 and G3 the parents of Nelson and Romney? I'm not sure if we could call them parents. Maybe older siblings. Not parents. Elder siblings, definitely. What might have been conceived. Basically, imagine a couple has some children, and imagine what their children might have been like if they had some early ones. I see Richards and Bijon. No. Ramming ships into freighters is not a good idea. Anyway, today's discussion is Nelson's, Dunkerques, tones, and battles. When is concentrating the entire main armament forward a good idea and not so good idea? Now, it's one of the interesting things. In concentrating your main armament forward is advantageous and disadvantageous in almost equal measure. It's half a dozen, 1/6 of the other. And basically, it comes down to it's how you use it. It's going to affect how you use it. You can, using an all-forward gunship and using it the same way as you would an equal distribution battery vessel is not going to give you good results. So, if you're in a forward gunship and you decide to turn broadside onto your opponent and blast away broadside, well, that's not really the most sensible thing you can do. In fact, honestly, that's probably one of the least sensible things you can do. Because that means you are giving up your advantage. Because your advantage is entirely your aspect. We also have to think about it not in terms of modern doctrine, because in terms of modern thinking, of course, we look for radar returns, so it doesn't matter to an extent. Although, again, if you're staring at the front of a ship rather than the side of a ship, it's going to be a far smaller return. But it still is different. Whereas when you're dealing with the 1920s, 1930s, and even to an extent a large chunk of World War II, you're dealing with visual range. You're dealing with visual identifications and visual perspective, and actually reducing that amount can be seen is really quite helpful. Good luck, M35 benders. Hello, Dejan Golchek. G3 is the older sister. Mm-hmm. I'm, of course, not watching Biden. It's probably better for my blood pressure I'm not. So, any news on a naval invasion? We'll be talking about that in Bill Trump's what's been going on today. And to recall, earlier today I tried making a shipping UAD that went with a 15-inch gun, 5 turrets, all forward armament. What could be the best combination for deck level guns, 55 turrets? 5 turrets, 15-inch guns. Good God, you put an artillery farm on the front of your ship. Oof. What was that? 3 quads and a treble, or 5 trebles? Please tell me it wasn't 3 trebles and 3 doubles. That's just Angela Paul. That's just I bow down to you. That is effort. No, it's good. Are we okay to ask about today's events in Ukraine today? No, I'm doing a strict policy of dividing today's history from Ukraine because we're going to be dealing with that in Bill Trump's, and it's going to get contentious. And I'm going to say this. I don't like the idea of invading other countries just to get your own way. I don't think it's a good policy to start off with, and I can see it going very wrong for you. But I don't want to get into that here because you are going to see nothing but Ukraine for the next few days. On all the news, you are going to see it coming everywhere. And I don't know about you, but this is my little respite from having to deal with that, and I'm looking forward to that. I've made a 6 quadruple gun arrangement on the battleships. Ouch. Anyway, so Hydra update. Well, there is, I think, should be a link down below. If there isn't a link down below, I will add one in. Yes, there is a link down below. To Hydra trip. Thank you to everyone who's being so generous about that. I know it's me being rather selfish at the moment with all that's going on in the world, but thank you to everyone who's been so kind and generous about that. And, well, it's good to look forward to, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you to everyone who's supporting that. Thank you to everyone who's helping me with that, and thank you to everyone who's donating. Thank you very much for that one. Anyway, let's get into tonight's topic, which is all forward armament. It's an efficiency thing. I don't know, it's taken us a while to get here, but it is an efficiency thing because of various factors. A ship's design and efficiency can be based on several things. First of all, you'll probably be commenting on the arcs of fire of its weapons, how much area they can cover versus the amount you have on them, which is my main objection with this thing. And this, of course, is a G3, and it's very nicely designed, written out, and sort of scripted out and worked out what it is. Secondly, and it's going to sound strange, efficiency as in its movement through the water. How efficient is its hull shape? How efficient is its weight displacement distribution, and therefore how is its center of mass, basically? What is it like in operational terms in heavy seas? All these things affect their efficiency. Finally, there is the efficiency of design as in the utilization of the space inside. This is actually inherently a far more efficient design than a design which is based around guns aft and forward. There is a reason for this. Because if I have guns aft and forward, then I need to have longer shafts, which require more effort to get them around turning from the engines to propellers. They have an impact in terms of wear, in terms of maintenance, in terms of cost, in terms of displacement. I also have to have more insulation around my engine rooms and boilers because I have to insulate at both ends in order to support the magazines, because I do not want my ammunition getting hot. I don't want that getting hot. I don't, the Royal Navy's had it with Gorgon and her sister. They know what happens. They had some incidents pre-World War One, which were also pretty scary. The Royal Navy, no Navy, likes its ammunition and its powder getting hot. There are issues caused by it. So that is a reality. That is a reality they are dealing with. Knight 681. It is common sense to expect the G3s were going to be better in efficiency and displacement, given it's a product of 15 years of battlecruiser development of Model 1. You'd hope so. You'd hope so. There are issues. The G3s are also designed based in the realistics of the time available. There is a great design table produced by the same person who produced this plan, but I'm nicking this without their permission. Admittedly, they have it on an open website, but you know, that is a very good site to go and look at. But I didn't want to nick their the full work, especially not their impressive work, which shows the lengths of the ships. And the fact is, the G3, because of its efficiency, comes in at shorter than the Hood. Which is important because we keep going over infrastructure. We keep talking about the importance of dry docks. We keep talking about the importance of the existing infrastructure. The Royal Navy knows it's in 1914, works out by 1915, it's not getting the 1916 uplift in terms of infrastructure development. And it's not expecting a 1922 one by the end of World War I, is it, either? Because it's expecting government to be tightening belt buckles. So it's expecting to have to make to 1928 with the infrastructure it has available. It wants to have ships which can make use of that infrastructure. Hood has a problem. Because for Hood to be viable, you really need to have upgraded the infrastructure, i.e., the size of the graving docks, all the sort of the floating docks available, all those things around the world. Well, this is where the G3s come in. They're more powerful than Hood, they're more flexible than Hood, and more importantly, they can be used They can be used in spaces and maintained in spaces far more than Hood. Vision. Placing a turret behind the bridge tower was dumb in the G3s. Nelson makes more sense. Agreed. But as we all know, I'm not a big fan of the Nelson arrangement. Cameron, Doc, what was the reason that the RN did not just build faster repeats than Nelson and Romney once the treaties fell? Honestly, there isn't really a good reason, other than they wanted a proper-looking battleship. That's it, in a nice way. I look at it and I go, you have a perfectly good design, you have 16-inch guns, you could work it out, you could build it, you could do this. You could do an updated Nelson and Rodney and have come up with a very good design and build it quickly, but no. I think once they get into the psyche of we're going to be doing the 14-inch gun thing, and we want 12 to 14-inch guns. Once you got 3 quadruple turrets, they're sort of going, we don't want to do an all-forward arrangement. And I think that's it, basically. But it's not a good thing. I think they should have kept with the Nelson and Romney design myself and just upgraded the speed. Hello, So, the G3s are designed to be efficient in their use of infrastructure. The N3s, of course, and I'll get to those in a second, are designed to be small. But what you can see here is, look at how it's designed. You've got space between the magazines underneath the forward superstructure, the command sort of the command center. And if you go back a second, you also have, this is the boilers where they begin. You see, you only have one level of installation. You have a secondary magazine below the secondary, this third turret. But your principal magazine is all the way over here. Your principal magazine, your principal storage area for all your shells, etc., is over here, a long way away from this. It's very easy to keep these at a stable temperature. It's very difficult if they're close to the engines. So, Miriam, it went all the way to 2022 with the 1914 infrastructure. To an extent. And 1906 everyone. Inca, why no transom stern on Nelsons after these were part of the G3 design? Would they have been faster for the same ship? Possibly. Possibly the transom sterns would have made them faster. But by that point, the Royal Navy was being pretty conservative in some respects on the Nelson Army design. They weren't too advanced with the technology at the time, Knights at Clarke. And Naval, were graving docks, floating docks ever considered for the Washington Treaty? Yes, but you just weren't allowed to upgrade certain facilities. Basically, Washington and London both include lists of places which you're not supposed to upgrade, either informally or formally. And here we go. We have the Washington Treaty, which of course makes it 35,000 tons for an individual ship, meaning you want your ship to be as efficient design as possible because you want to get the most out of your 35,000 tons. But you also get an overall tonnage limitation. So for Britain and America, well, their 35,000 ton ships, they are theoretically, I say this theoretically, well, they're allowed 10 ships equals 350,000 tons, 5 ships equals 175,000 tons. 525,000 tons equals 350,000 tons plus 175,000 tons, which equals 15 ships. Japan's allowed 315,000 tons. So they're technically allowed 9 ships to Britain and America's 15. So they're allowed 60%. France and Italy are both allowed 175,000 tons. Bones, finished your book. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. And 175,000 tons means they are allowed 5 ships of 35,000 tons. Now, I've actually included an example of the ships retained by France, because this is the problem. France has no ship anywhere within any region anywhere close to 35,000 tons. They don't. Look at those battleships. They are all 23,500 tons or less. In fact, a goodly portion of them 18,900 tons. Don't take this the wrong way, but there aren't many ships here which any of the major navies, i.e. Britain, America, Japan, are going to actually sweat about or worry. This is the problem for France. No capital ship of any of the contracting powers shall carry a gun of a caliber in excess of 16 inches. Basically, that is always Article 6. Always for me is basically the US Navy saying, thank the Lord that the Royal Navy haven't built an 18-inch battleship. If my suspicion about Agincourt proves correct, and I know people like to point out that the covering documents do say various similar things, and yes, I do agree. She is definitely based on a Queen Elizabeth design. I'm not sure that, but some suggest potentially she's a battlecruiser version of Queen Elizabeth. I don't think that. I think small tube boiler, definitely. Just my suspicion is she jumps up to 18-inch guns as well. Because there are those 2 programs. Small tube boilers appear from nowhere for the R-class Renown and Repulse, and 18-inch guns appear for HMS Furious, and it's just a case of, and those 18-inch guns, well, developing under, we'll leave that one side. So they have 16 inches as the limit. That's what the biggest that anyone's building. No one has to lose anything. Well, hey. And to be fair, the Americans and the Japanese are happy to accept Hood because Some of the British claim that she is woefully inefficient compared to recent learning and knowledge and understanding of World War One experience. She's not. She's not as good as she could be, i.e., she's not this. I still don't like that third turret. But she's a lot better than anything else in the world at this point. But also, they're happy about they don't mind her because she has 15-inch guns, and of course, that means theirs have 16-inch, so they feel they're more powerful. She might be the largest battleship in the world, largest dreadnought in the world, although it's a battle cruiser, definitely a battle cruiser. She's not the most powerful because she's got 8 15-inch guns. Actually, why was RM Leonardo da Vinci part of these allowed tonnage when she was sunk? She had sunk and was turned right off because they were allowed to replace her. Sam Richards, would there be any weight saving with Transfer Stone for Nelson's? Not much one. A little bit, but not much. I just repeat this. You know, any way we can turn C turret into X turret into a conventional design? No. Because, TMO, let me explain why. If you move C turret, this turret, back to X, you then have to put insulation between X turret and the engines. You have to move all the engines. Then you have to build more insulation at this end as well, and more insulation at this end. So you double the amount of insulation. You also change the weight distribution, change the center, the balance, change the organization of the ship. And more importantly, you actually create dead space which you can't use for things. That's one of the advantages. When you look at this design and you really do figure it out, you see that there is actually spaces which can be used for stuff if you have guns and shells and magazines in one space and machinery room, etc., and boiler rooms in another. Although I do not like that Q turret. I really don't. And then, of course, the London Treaty comes in and goes, well, I have some ideas about how often you can replace these ships and how long you have to keep them for. And all that is what feeds into the ideas of these ships going forward. And is a factor in the 19s, 20s, and 30s in their involvement of this design. But I'm going to say this quite clearly. It is not necessarily as new a concept as we might like to believe. We have seen ships which were central battery ships. They had a central turret. We have seen ships with all sorts of configurations of wing turrets and movement of guns, etc. Putting all your guns forward and your engines aft is not a new thing, really. Because again, you could go down to some destroyer types, etc., which had their guns forward, their torpedoes on the hull aft, on top of the hull, and their engines running away inside that hull. You know, that's a sort of similar idea going on, because it's deck penetrating weapons forward, non-deck penetrating weapons aft. The picture of this G3 comes from Maciej Dunkerques. If you can see his thing, he's done a whole lot of work and some really cool stuff, actually. You can go and find them. Anyway, so capital ships. This is fun. The N3 battleship. Now, I'm treating battleships to an extent as different from battle cruisers. Battle cruisers have an advantage. They are designed to engage definitely in the open sea and to maneuver as part of their fighting. In that, I would say they have a more natural fit with an all-forward armament than a battleship. Saying that, though, if the N3 had actually been built, then this thing would have been an absolute nightmare for anyone to deal with. And this is by Zolly, and it's a picture of how it would look like if it had been modernized. It's a cool picture. It is a cool picture. Now, again, this has the similar basic layout as the G3 design, so we can think about what it's being used for. But also, there is an advantage going on here. There is a very big advantage. If we think about discussions I've done of the Battle of Jutland, etc., and especially what a Buffnut squadron does in terms of putting smoke in front of the battleship's guns so they couldn't actually fire at the Germans at one point, and Germans couldn't fire at them. This does have an advantage. The fire control and all the forward systems are forward of the stack. They're forward of the funnel, which is great because it means there's very unlikely to get any smoke obscuring them. They're also pretty stable in terms of their concentrated. Again, one of the issues you often get, but don't necessarily think about if you have an equally distributed distributed battery, i.e. fore and aft, is those guns are at that level down there, at that one level, at this end, and those are another level. And the ship might be doing that, it might be high at this end, low at this end, etc. And they might actually be built at slightly different levels to save weight. This one, all the guns, the A turret is at the same level as the Q turret, and the B turret is slightly higher. It becomes less complicated. They're all closer together, so you have a greater concentration of fire. This is a great advantage with the Nelsons. This is an advantage of them. The guns are concentrated, which actually makes aiming far easier. And if you go into your Ultimate Adult Dreadnoughts, etc., and you are using an all-forward firing design, you will often find that, hang on, this is getting into on the target more quickly. I don't know why. No matter part because you're tricking your logarithm, but in fact, it is being tricked by the reality of the occasion. If you concentrate your guns, the firing solution is that much easier. Now, there's of course a disadvantage because one decent hit could theoretically blow you sky high and cut out all your main battery. This is why we usually go for equal distribution. But there are ways to mitigate that against that with an all-forward battery as well. And let's see what the questions are of the N3s, because the N3s are mainly famous for being massive lumps of armor. T-Zolly. T-Zolly is T-Zolly. Probably Zoltan Zolly. Probably, but very, very good artist. River, were there a safe place designed in these ships, Dr. Clarke? They still had conning towers. Well, Mr. Seja, I'm sorry, I'm going to report you as that one. Okay. Vision, would wing turrets on G3s help with arcs of fire from the third turret, like 2 single mounts, or no. And N3 isn't much better for firing off, trust me. There is still that lovely funnel straight there. It just, and there's all the structure. If you look at the level of the guns, the superstructure is actually built up higher than it in front of it. So, no, firing aft is not a good position to be in. Flashy Vachel, why not go for 2 turrets forward, like the Dunkerques or H3A? The RN preferred the triple turret, and the RN to the quadruple, especially at this point when they're building them. And to be fair, the RN also liked the concept of having 3 turrets, because then if one's disabled, you only lost a third of your firepower, rather than 2 turrets, when if you lose one, you've got lost half. The G3 is a solid battleship design. G3 is never felt like just fast battleships. No, I would argue the G3s are battle cruisers. I'd say the G3s you could make into a fast battleship, but they are battle cruisers, especially once you have this build. Again, it's one of the problems is the people, they go, oh, well, this armor was used on this earlier variant of a Dreadnought, so it must be still this Dreadnought battleship, so this must be a Dreadnought battleship. And you go, no. It's just that was used on the armor when the guns were that powerful. By the time you get to this point, the guns are this powerful, and therefore this is the same proportional armor as they had on those battlecruisers. Inca, is that entry design showing a realistic RM paint scheme? I would judge it so, yes. Guinea Shimmy. Avzaski, did the IJN have access to the N3 general plans? I see resemblance now to tower structures from Brigada. I think they have a similar solution to similar problems. Not really Pagoda. But there is a similarity also if you think about what goes into Nelson and Rodney in terms of their superstructure and what goes into this ship. That's true, Rochelle. The Campbell's pretty solid on G3 N3 process. That's different. The patron saint names would not have likely have been accepted by King George V for the N3. You never know. He might have liked it. That's accurate. The one thing that annoys me about Zolly is when he named after the patron saints the most powerful ships in the RN. What? Well, that's what that wasn't Zolly. I don't think that was Zolly who named them. I think that was the British. Occasionally, the British do like patron saints. We've had vessels with those names before. TM1, G3 or Iowa class preference? Iowa's slightly faster, G3 is slightly better armored, and I can probably get more infrastructure to support G3 over an Iowa, so I'd probably go with a G3. Dan Freeman, N3 is not so much heavily armored as armored as a lump of armor carved out into a ship design. Potentially. The French double twin turrets have some chance that the 2 guns might survive a turret hit, but a hit to the barbette still would jam it. Yep. Tinon, N3 versus Yamamoto, G3 versus Iowa. G3 versus Iowa. It would be interesting to see what the matchup would be. I think it would depend. If Admiral Lee's in charge of the Iowa, I'm probably going to put the Iowa. If which captain shall I go for? The guy in charge of Repulse or the guy in charge of Rodney? I'm going to go with Rodney. If Captain Darrell Hampton, because he was luckier. If Darrell Hampton is in charge of the G3, then the G3. How's that sound? Basically, they're close enough in capabilities and design that it's going to come down to the commanding officers, which occasionally these things do come down to. And if you have Ching Lee versus Darrell Hampton, then toss a coin, literally. I know 14-inch barrels are fairly comparable to a modern battleship. In 1918, 1920, this is what's being built as a battleship. You can't compare it to the past ones, you have to compare it to the current ones. That's a far heavier belt. And 32 knots, that's comparable to a fast battleship, which is something which occurs in the late 1930s, early 1940s. Yes, the fast battleship catches up with the battle cruiser, but again, we don't have battle cruisers built in that period, so we don't know what speeds the battle cruisers would be doing. Tianong, what about N3 versus Yamato? Yamato. A fully modernized N3 is going to be slower than Yamato. It is going to be slower. But it's going to have a heck of a lot of armor. And it's got very powerful, it's got 9 18-inch guns. The thing is, though, if the N3 had existed, I doubt the Yamato would have turned out as the Yamato did. Because, in the nicest way, the Japanese are not going to design a ship which has less firepower than the British. So just imagine if N3 has been built and N3 is in service. Let's say the RN somehow gets 4 N3s and 4 G3s, and then there's a treaty system agreed. So the US Navy is probably at that point crying somewhere, going, Congress, we hate you! We can all imagine the poor US Navy looking at Congress going, why did you agree to a treaty? Now we can't match that thing. Have you seen them? But again, I'm not saying US could build an equivalent to the N3 battleship. They could. I'm saying I doubt Congress in the 1920s would fund an equivalent to an N3 battleship. Treaty or no treaty, equivalents or no equivalents. There's the reason they're building up so much prior to World War II, because Congress hasn't been funding them. Believe it or not, there's this modern perception that Congress likes to fund defense. It wasn't always the case, and even today it's arguable. But the point is, if the N3 had been built, Yamato would not have looked... If there had been 4 of these in the world, Yamato would have not been Yamato. 22-inch guns? Possibly. They would have gone... Think about it, what they'd have to go. They'd have gone, okay, so we're going to design her to take on standard battleships, but that means she's just going to be in the region of this. And yes, they build 2. But again, if they've got Yamato and Musashi, they've got those 2 ships, and the Royal Navy's got 4 N3s in the service, they've got a problem. Especially if the RN gets 2 of them, or 3 of them out there. Because, yeah, Yamato and Musashi can go faster and run away, but that doesn't help them. Because a battleship's purpose is not supposed to be run away, it's supposed to win a fight. And the thing is, if you've got the same engagement ranges, you're in trouble. I'd read that the G3 and N3 were designed to be as advanced as they were, so they could be used to kill off the ships the USA and Japan building in the Washington Naval Treaty. Not really. The British were hoping to get them. I think in the Royal Navy's ideal world, they'd have got the 4 G3s and the 4 N3s, and that would have been agreed through the Washington Naval Treaty. The RM would have got those 8 new ships. Then they'd have worried about other people. Again, I don't deny that, but names saw little use, and they're not the most powerful ship. I think it would make more sense to them most famous admirals or certain gods. I have a feeling in nicest way, the N3s would sort about being the Satan names. I don't think they would have been the Satan names. I have a feeling they might have been the battle names from World War One. I think we might have had an HMS Falklands, an HMS Dogger Bank, an HMS Jutland, because the British were still trying to claim victory at that point. Thank you, 'tis Francis' fault. And thank you very much, 'tis Francis' fault. I just saw how much that was for. Thank you. And thank and probably which of the other ones would I go for? This can't be Cornell. Don't want to be that one. It needs to be a naval victory. Falkland Islands, Dogger Bank. Jutland and Zeebrugge, possibly. Or possibly they'd have gone for a king's name and retired King George V. Or the fourth, for the King George. Do you know, this is the trouble for the UK. They have so many King Georges. I keep trying. It's not fair for people like me who have to try and remember all the names and remember which one's in service at which point. So, an N3 G3 with its aft mast removed and a helicopter deck installed, and the Royal Marines would have used it as assault ship, as the main assault ship in the 90s. They would possibly have tried. That would, honestly, let's be honest, that would have been fairly capable. You could have removed the third turret and stuck a hangar in there and just stuck an entire flight deck all along and around the funnel. So you could have had landing and takeoff platforms. You know, they could have had a helicopter hangar and flight deck just extending back around everything. Later on, block ship, they had the timbers, dig them up and build it? Potentially. Second, though I think it might be it'd be very interesting to see an N3 or G3 with an F series style layout, because it would be highly interesting. The F series style layout would be very, very scary. If you were building an F style layout of the N3, let's see, F comes after G, so LMNO, so an O3, let's call it, an O3 design, 18-inch battleship. That would be very scary for a lot of people. That would probably win a fight with Yamato. And the reason I say that is because with 9 guns able to fire forward, it could present a very, very narrow aspect of itself to its opponent, allowing it to fire all its guns, whilst the Yamato, in contrast, will have to turn almost broadside on to be able to concentrate its firepower. Someone was talking about the other day about dealing with people crossing the T, etc. And all the forward gun arrangement does to an extent deal with that, because, well, while you're crossing the T, that's great, but you're broadside onto all their guns while they're the narrowest point onto their guns. Traditionally, broadside gives you an advantage because you're concentrating all your fire, and they can't concentrate they can only fire their forward guns. That's the whole point. That's why HMS Dreadnought has 6 guns firing forward, because Fisher is absolutely scared stiff of that happening. He's petrified of having the T crossed. Well, if you have all your guns firing forward, and the enemy crosses your T, well, it reverses the scenario, because instead of it being them being able to concentrate all their firepower onto you onto you, you're still able to concentrate all your firepower on them. They're able to concentrate all their firepower on you, but you're a far smaller target than they are, and you have a far more difficult, far more transitionary aspect to judge. Because if you think about it, if you see a target doing that at a distance, it's easier for you to work out how far away it is. Whereas if you have a target doing that, it's more complicated, isn't it? And this is what it's entirely playing on. So an all-forward firepower arrangement for a battle cruiser, For a battleship, can make a lot of sense. For a battleship, it's slightly more complicated in my mind because they can end up in the large slogging matches where they're in a group of other ships which are also broadside. There is the battle line doctrine, there is all that, in which case you might as well have distributed firepower because you're going to be broadside on anyway. But for a battle cruiser, it certainly makes a lot of sense. And if I was building an 18-inch battleship hunter, which is basically supposed to go out and find enemy battleships and destroy them, I would possibly again consider an all-forward armament because I can I can reduce down the distance and length of my the space I need to armor, and in return, I can make it thicker. And this is the point behind the Nelson class. Let's seriously think about it. With a Nelson class, the whole thing is down to concentrate so they can make them as short as possible, so they can concentrate the armor, the thickest amount of armor, over the shortest amount of space possible. So you have a certain weight allocation allocated to armor. You can use that over a very short space and give yourself the maximum thickness, which is useful. It makes them very survivable. Again, there was a discussion the other day about hood, a modernized hood holding off Yamato. Not going to happen. But if Nelson and Rodney had been there, yes, they only got 16-inch guns versus Yamato's 18-inch. But if Nelson and Rodney, yes, they're slower, but Yamato would not want to get too close to them and would not like... they could probably hold Yamato off. It wouldn't necessarily be a good battle, and I'm not saying both would come away intact or even necessarily both would come away. But they could actually hold off Yamato, whereas Hood couldn't. Hood wouldn't stand a freaking chance of it. An earthly. It's a battle cruiser. It's not supposed to get into a standing fight with an 18-inch armed battleship. But the Nelson class are, to an extent, able to do that because of the level of armor they have. Because they are quite so heavily... they're basically floating balls of armor. As someone described the N3 earlier. No, because weren't they working... I seem to remember with the battlecruiser and the battleship in the free concepts, they started off and were working out. So with the battlecruisers, they're working down to A, and with the battleships, they're working up to Z. So Z3 would be an ultimate battleship design, and A3 would be an ultimate battlecruiser design. So so F is the next one along in the battlecruiser designs, after the Gs, and O would be the next one of the battleship designs. That's still very kind of you to Strasbourg. That's okay. That's an interesting idea, and something that has happened, because we did have an HMS Trafalgar and HMS Naval as first rates from the HSL. I will have to consider your suggestion when looking into my immersion. You see, that I do think, I wonder... Again, the Royal Navy has used Saint names before as holding names before they've put in battle names, when they've made the decision as whether it's sensible to go with battle names. Because no one really argues against Saint names, but no one really wants them either. Dan Freeman. We have had quite a few King George V's. King George's. I to 4 were long 18th century. V was World War One. 6 was World War Two. Not as bad as French. So much imagination. Really enough a Louis? Yeah, they always wanted Louis. There are 8 Henrys. Yes, but we don't tend to name a lot of ships Henry. I don't know why. HMS Henry VIII would be an interesting vessel to serve on. The odds are it turns up in a port, and it either comes home with all its crew married, divorced, or beheaded. Or, you know. So again, I have to figure out how to make that one in UAD. I have been working on those in UAD. The G3 design, N3, the hull, this is one of the USPs I decided for UAD. You can get a G3 hull, and you can muck around with it, and it's a very good hull to use. The old British 18-inch were even more heavy than the super heavy shells from the Hourglass. Yep. Also, all forward is also a better position for aggression. Angling a battleship wasn't common, but if it was natural to do so, that's only an advantage. And this is the point. When we're talking about the Nelson class, we were talking about Darrell Hamilton the other week, and we were talking about how he was making HMS Rodney dance while fighting Bismarck. He was going towards the direction of shot. He could do that because he only had to worry about making sure his front end was pointing towards the Bismarck. He didn't have to worry about guns out the rear. You know, King George V has to sail a far more predictable line because King George V has to worry about guns rear and guns forward. Yes, they have good arcs. Yes, they have good aims. Not sort of agreeing with that at all, not saying they're bad or anything like that. I don't need to tangle with the King George V Class Association. They're lovely people. But what I'm saying is that the all-forward arrangement does have an advantage. Ian Clarke, can you think of any historic battleship actions where an all-forward main arm would have affected the result? I can think of a few where it did affect the result. In a couple of battles in the Mediterranean and a couple of battles in... Definitely a couple of battles in the Mediterranean, if they'd had an all-forward armament, that would have affected the result. Cert, again, comes back to mind. I would say the Battle of the Bismarck is affected by it. I would say the Battle of the... I don't think the Battle of North Cape, the result would have been affected by an all-forward armament, but I do think Scharnhorst would have been sunk a lot even quicker. And it's one of those scenarios. I think if you'd had all forward armed ships at the Battle of the Falkland Islands and all forward armed ships in a couple of other engagements in sort of the Dogger Bank, etc., you were especially chase engagements. You would have had results which were far more reflective of what happened than as they were. Hello, Cash. So, I have read some of the Against the Lord story. Oh my god, OMG, oh my goodness. A tribal flotilla sunk a battle force of the Congos. Okay, well, you know, Seneca, whilst I agree that can be an interesting one, I would say, considering some of the people who are put in charge of tribal flotillas and some of the officers in charge of tribal destroyers, that's not beyond the realms of possibility. it might be beyond the realms of likelihood of their torpedoes actually working, but it's not beyond the realms of all possibility. They'd certainly give it a jolly good go, is the thing I would point out. I was asking, also, if a ship is moving towards you and you are broadside, then you have to constantly adjust the distance of fire, and you have minimal control of actual distance. You have to lose broadside to control. Yep. Tiamong, it's really ironic that Nelson is so heavily armored in real life, but so flimsy in World Warships. Yes, this is a little thing. I'm not going to make too many comments about World Warships tonight, because of obvious reasons, but I would say there is a little bit thing off with their simulations of Nelson, because in the nicest way, yeah, good NelRods have carried more cheese. Yes, the real world armor of the NelRods is well beyond. Hello, Hieroglyph. Hieroglyph, I can't respond to that comment because it's not translating. So, I've got these very cool characters in front of me, which look really cool. I have to admit, one of them looks to me like a skyscraper, but we'll leave that to one side. And a couple look like a temple. Now, Tyrion, if you saw Drax Hood refit video, 1944 Hood had 84 40mm 40mm guns in 6 octuple, 9 quadruple, or 6 or 8 twin mounts, and 12 signal. Yeah, it would have certainly had a lot of firepower. And first of all, in UAD, I find the biggest issue to British all-four guns is the lack of secondaries, which can be a problem. Well, it can be a problem, but I have found a solution: is the treble 6-inch secondary or the treble 4-inch secondary. Both work very, very well. I can confirm the treble 6 and treble 4 are very good as secondaries. That should be Rochelle. The British 18-inch is sometimes quoted as £3,600. Not correct, but still gets cited. No, I actually have the figures for the British 18-inch gun. The 18-inch 45 or the 18-inch Mark II gun, the one which would have, I think they were actually working on, comes in at gun weight from Vickers, 161 tons, well, 161 and a half tons. And the ammunition for it, the 1921 design the 1920 design for high explosive was up to £4,000, but the armor piercing was £3,320, or that's 1.5 tons. And the 1921 design, it's 1.3 tons for the armor APC. Well, hang on. It's between 1.2 and 1.3 tons for the armor piercing, depending on what they're looking at, and the high explosive is 1.3 tons. And if you would like the details of that, the details for the Royal Navy's 18-inch guns from Navy Weps are down below as a nice link. Because I do enjoy Navy Weps and they're a good site. And again, the advantages of this are quite simple. It's about your distributed design. It's also efficiency of production. Think about it, when you're building a ship, you can concentrate on, right then, the engine spaces. These are what the engine spaces are going to need to be like. This is what the magazine spaces are going to be like. You know, you only have one transition between armor schemes, etc. I would say my big problem with the Nelson class is this turret. I think it needs to be spun around, and my next big problem is that I would like a third shaft and I'd like more horsepower, but probably a transom stern. But the thing is, they go for a conventional stern because that's traditional, and these ships are, when you're only going to get two, you start to build them as a flagship. This is a point I've kept making, and I know I've made it in the sisters videos and various other things and long patrols. When you're only making two of something, it becomes a flagship and it becomes important, and you have to protect it, and it's keeping it safe. One, and I know I say this so many times, but I'm going to say this again. I say this almost every video it seems to do. One is none. It's a joyous capability, but it's a capability which you only have when it's available. Two usually have something available, but if an accident happens, you only have one, so you're down to white elephant syndrome or golden egg syndrome. Three, then you have something viable. You have usually a capability available. Four, then you usually have one of the capabilities at sea, as long as one available to surge the sea and the other two in refit. Five, guaranteed one at sea, and probably two available to surge, and two in refit and repair. And 6, again, it sort of goes up like that. But what does it do? A 6 is a far bigger pool to draw from. So the problem with the Nelson class, and I would argue this is what affects their design, is that Nelson class becomes obsessed with armor. They become definitely battleships rather than possibly going slightly lighter on the armor and going for fast battleships with 28 knot speeds, because the Royal Navy's only getting 2. And that would actually give us a very different opinion of an all-forward gunship. If the Royal Navy had got, let's say, 6, again, I worked out the maths, it's going into, it's in a long patrol, which is, I think, has it come up, or is it going to come up? I'm not sure if it's out yet or if it's coming out, but I have done it. And basically, I looked through the maths of it, and I worked out with a nice Excel spreadsheet. Got it in front of me, in fact. If I pull it up, yes. So, if the Royal Navy got to retire, we're on the agreement in the Washington Treaty, it can retire Thunderer, King George V, Ajax, Centurion. It's allowed to build to 558,000 tons, 558,950 tons of battleship. So it's allowed to build 2. If it had been allowed to also retire Bembo, Emperor of India, Iron Duke, Marlborough, and Tiger, so it had retired all its 13.5-inch ships, and all the ships which weigh 25,000 tons, roughly, other than Tiger, which weighs 28,500 tons, etc. It would have had enough that it could have built, and still been able to build up to either 525,000 tons or 558,000 tons. They could have built between 5 and 6, depending on those figures, of the NelRods. And if they'd been building 5 to 6 on the NelRods, I think they'd be very different ships. I think if you're building 2 of the ships, you're going to concentrate on armor and survivability of everything, because these are your only 16-inch battleships. These are your specialists. Whereas I think if you're able to build 6, you're still going to build them all forward gunship, because you still want the most efficient design you can build possible. But I think you do spin those turrets around, and I do think you stick in the 3rd shaft. And maybe you get slightly less armor, but you've got 6 of them. And if you've got 6 of them, well, if you lose one, you don't want to lose one, but you've still got 5 others. But the thing is, if you've got 6 and they're all able to do 28 knots, the odds of you losing one are slightly less. And you've suddenly made a big problem for everyone. And if you've got 6 of these in service, well, 6 of these plus 5 R's and 5 Queen Elizabeths, Renown, Repulse, and Hood, that's a very scary force. That's a force the Royal Navy can build from. Does it mean that ultimately the Royal Navy is losing 15-inch battleships in the later treaties? If they're cutting them down? Possibly they're getting rid of our class. Which also might, strange enough, affect which ships are being modernized and when they're being modernized and how much effort they're putting into modernizing them. So again, the R class might well be the ones which they quickly decide they're not going to bother modernizing them, because they're either getting rid of them or they are replacing them. Which could have an impact on things. I don't think outfitting the NelRods with cheese armor would have been good effective on crew morale. We still got having a bit of cheese as a tragic loss to battle. We love that cheese. See it. Colin Cameron, is Charles not supposed to be using George as his coronation name? Yes. Yes, it will. Sim Richards, our class battleship had poor our class versus Rodney, Nelson and Rodney would have been interesting. They had the speed, but again, firepower and armor, it's an interesting question. Now, John Luke, Nelson class shows how even a compromised design from the Iron could dance, devastating to a speed in excess of what other force fought did. Imagine that extra few thousand tons treaty allowance. Yep. Well, as I said, not even an extra few thousand tons. They could have allowed 1,200 tons more because they're 33,800 tons in standard. And they could have, as I said, if you, let's say you got treaty limits of 36,000 tons, and again you got 6 of them, well, then you're dealing with a very different ship. Right, Cash, was there a weakness to frontal attack from destroyers on these designs? Not really. And the reason is, again, is these 6-inch guns. They can fire forward. And they can fire forward very well. And if you look, you'll notice that they can fire 6-inch guns can fire forward, 2 covering each quarter, 4 covering each quarter, and they've got, technically all 6 can cover the stern. And the other advantage they have, because of the visibility they get from the forward firing positions, etc., they can always turn. They can always shape their movements to give their secondary guns better aims and better ability to fire. Plus, again, you're supposed to have your own destroyers with you. In car, what would an old KGV forward arm be? A 3 times quad 14-inch? You never know. But that does seem to be the problem that why they don't go with it, because they decided they are doing the quad 14-inch. I think if they kept with the treble 16-inch, they might have gone for NelRods design basis. Rob, in the spirit of saving space, could the superstructure be built over? I'm going to read that a second. Could the superstructure be built over a main battery turret? Theoretically, but I wouldn't like to. You're going to get a lot of interesting damage on. Thank you, Tian Wong. Knights of Great Everyone. The 1944 Hood has 3 anti-aircraft guns more than HMS Nelson in 1944 refit. And HMS Nelson in 1944 refit had 131 US level firepower. Cool. John, look, let's see. If G3s were built in the 30s, would they have been able to have that turret moved during any concealed rebuild? If they'd been built in the 30s, that turret would have been moved. Obviously, after superstructure, but could it have been easier to move forward as well? It would have probably been easier to move it forward than move it aft. Honestly, it's actually easier. This is one of the things, when they're actually looking at the Nelson class, they do consider the whole rear turret design, but actually using the hull and the designs they're working on, it's actually easier to move a turret forward than move it aft and combine superstructures. Because if you look, if I get a picture up here, and I go to this one, yeah. Here is the point. If you look at the G3 and you look at the Nelson class, is it me, or does it look like that superstructure has been added? The question I sort of would ask you all, that of course that below is the G3, and it looks to me a lot like this superstructure has had the forward superstructure added onto it, and it's been new shaped, and that's what they've done. They have literally moved around the superstructures and just combined them together. So they've moved the gun forward and pushed it round, and they've moved the other aft. That's all they did. They're trying. There were 4 Polish destroyers like Pirin during the Battle of and Bismarck wouldn't survive that day. They could barely handle one. 4 Polish destroyers and 4 tribal destroyers. A full flotilla. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that would have been an interesting thing to watch. Armament. You might need to make a shirt with if you have one. I am tempted to. I am working. I'm going to look at the designs. I'm going to have see what I can do with that. Actually, it's why I still argued our battlecruisers were still valuable. Shame the UK could not have its Asian fleet, even if it was I suppose for all the ships. Freeman, i.e. no refit for like maybe Malaya or Barnum gas to look instead. Alternatively, load of faster battleships, maybe Repulse and Hood, get a better buff. Well, the thing was, if you have Nelsons as 28-knot ships, then when you're upgrading the Queen Elizabeth class, you can upgrade them to get them to 28 knots. But if you change their engines around again, we can. I have gone into this in one of the long patrols. I'm not sure. We've got so many long patrols which are coming up. I cannot remember which one it's in. But I've got into it and used the picture which has been on Discord of the Warspites refit and point out that actually you could have added in extra boilers. They use 6 of the 8 boiler rooms and they use 2 for different for something else for a storage space. Well, if they'd used all 8, they could have probably got them up to 28 knots. And if they got them up to 28 knots and the Nelson class being 28 knots, you'd have had 11 battleships capable of 28 knots. That's viable. I'm not sure about that question. Thanks to Navy Whips. Not been there for almost 20 years. Didn't know it was still going. Yes, it's still there. Still good. Rochelle. I was led to believe the move away from the G3 shape to the KGV was mostly down to machinery improvements, allowing a better hull form. Not really. There certainly is that argument made, but honestly, no. It's you're dealing with Chatfield, and you have to remember Chatfield is a traditionalist who loves the 14-inch gun and believes valiantly that the most important thing is volume of fire, not weight of fire. And you see, the trouble is he's right when it comes to the difference between a 6-inch and an 8-inch cruiser. But the trouble is, the difference between 9 16-inch guns and 10 14-inch guns is not really a loss in terms of the volume of fire. And when you consider the actual impact of the shell and the weight of the shell hitting, yeah. Oh, gosh, moving superstructure around to accommodate that gun sounds like old man rules. Yep. Thank you, Mr. Cash. Thank you. Actually, it's a very old T-shirt. I got this down in Cornwall must be about 20 years ago, and still fits, which is quite disturbing. Either I was a very, very large, nearly 15-year-old, or I have shrunk. I've gone up and shrunk. Anyway, let's get on to the Frenchies. And I'm going to put in a thing in here because I think I should put in some timestamps. 0120. And between that, because that's at 80 and that's at 30, so it's 55. So, now a nice timestamp should be appearing, which will be good for everyone and make me happy. So, here is what is originally the French are looking at. 12 guns. Yes, it's an ugly as anything superstructure. Please ignore the superstructure. But think about this. And I will admit, this design is someone else's drawing, which they posted on Wikipedia. And I know I shouldn't be using someone else's drawing, but they did it far nicer than me. I spent ages trying to figure out and get my CAD to actually produce something like this. And honestly, let's put it this way. I will say this for them, and I will say this is the truth. They were really very good at producing this accurately without wanting to redesign it and give it some flares. And I really wanted to give it some flares. I massively wanted to give it some flares. Because that superstructure is just no, France. Anyway, what I've done instead is I've coloured theirs in, and so I can point things out. Okay, it's 36,000 ton fully loaded. It wouldn't have been 36,000 tons in standard. But the point is, this is what the French were looking at. But the trouble is, we go back to the treaty. Okay, go back to the treaty. What's France allowed? They're allowed 175,000 tons. And by the way, in metric tons, the design is 37,000 metric tons. So they're allowed 35,000 tons in standard. And 175,000 tons overall, which is 5 ships. So they could build 5 of these, and that'd be all the battleships they'd have. Does anyone see the small problem for them? 5 of these would be great. They'd be lovely. They'd be wonderful. But the trouble is, they'd be 5 ships armed with 30, each armed with 12, 13-inch guns. And 12, 5.1-inch guns. And honestly, they wouldn't be that capable, would they? And yes, there is an argument that these are being built in response to the Trento-class cruisers. There is a response that these are built in terms of response to the Deutschland class. And I have to admit, this design is basically, in theory, an expanded Suffren class design. In that's what they've apparently based it on, but I'm not sure, because the Suffren is actually pretty, whereas this is not. It might be because things aren't in proportion once you expand it. It is. You can see the Suffren design there, but it's not really there, if you know what I mean. I can see where it's coming from. And I know they have a lot of heart. Let's go. Well, why would a Dunkerques armor no match for the guns of Hood? Because the Dunkerques are not really being designed for that. Some flares. No, every time I drew this, I found myself fixing the superstructure. And other proportions. This is the trouble. When I start mucking around on CAD, I have to control myself very strongly to actually make myself draw what is supposed to be there. Hello, Ian Stradling. Hi, Dick Richards. Okay. Didn't the French only have 3 Britannias? So the 2 Dunkerques are 1,000 pounds too heavy, but the UK had 10, 15-inch battleships. This is the agreement of the treaties. Again, this is the problem for the French. This is the treaty they've signed up to. The British get 525,000 tons. Well, in reality, the British actually get more than that, remember? The British get 558,000 tons to enable them to build Nelson and Rodney, because the Royal Navy, the British, threatened to walk away from the treaty if they're not at least allowed to build 2 new ships. And for that, they are only sacrificing 4 ships. As said, if they sacrifice Bembo, Emperor of India, Iron Duke, Marlborough, and Tiger, so they sacrificed 9 ships in total, so those 5, as well as Thunderer, King George V, and Ajax and Centurion, they could have got themselves 6 NelRods, or variants of them. But this is what the French are doing. So the French go with the Dunkerque class. And let's first start off with the Dunkerques. What are they in terms of size? Well, the Dunkerques are the first fast battleships. They are fast battleships because they can do 29.5 knots. But their standard displacement is 26,500 tons. In full load, they have 35,500 tons. So they take on 9,000 tons of water and all sorts of other things added on. Remember what the definition of a standard displacement is. They have 8 guns, and whilst their armour is 8.9 inches thick on the main deck and 8.9 inches thick on the armour belt, the deck is 4.5 inches thick, the gun turrets are 13 inches thick, and the conning tower is 10 inches thick. Let's be honest, the Bretagne class, this thing, is 36,000 tons, fully loaded, apparently. Or 36,000 tons in standard, depends on what you think. If it was 36,000 tons in standard, they were planning on really breaking the things. But the point is, they could build 4 of these, they felt, or at least 4 for their allocated tonnage, whereas at best they could get 2 of these. Which is better, 4 Dunkerque style ships, or 2 of this? French decide this is better, because 2 times 12 is 24 guns, but 4 times 8, that's 32. And they have a lot more firepower in terms of their all-around fire from their secondaries. They're quite well orientated. They have secondary armaments in the center of the ship. Those are their defensive weapons. They have their offensive weapons forward, and they have their aircraft aft. As you can see, there is a nice load of oil fuel stored between boiler room 1 and the various magazines. That's useful. That's going to keep the ammunition cool. It's going to keep the weapon systems cool. It's going to help. And that's what they're looking for, ultimately. They're looking for an efficient design, and the Dunkerque class are efficient. They're not pretty, but they're efficient. They're prettier than the... And I think, let's be honest, they're prettier than this. But they're efficient. Come guys, 5 ships for the Atlantic, Med, and Far East doesn't look good. Nope. John Luke, would the Iron superstructures NelRod onwards be superior in Atlantic weather? Also, matching them against, say, an Iowa superstructure, does it have anything meaningful impact on endurance and available speed? Available space. It does give them slightly more available space, I would argue. Doesn't really have a meaningful impact on endurance. Does possibly give them a sort of strength when it comes to visual range spotting. And I would say the NelRods are probably better for the Atlantic weather. Strasbourg was more heavily armoured than Sister Dunkirk, yes. John Romero, 12 and 13 inch and a 16 inch gun wall is a little lucky in gunpowder. Sadly, yes, you're true. Rakesh, how do you think a Dunkirk would fare against Alaska? I guess it would be a win for the Alaska. Just curious if you think it would be one-way traffic. The thing is, the Alaska class are heavy cruisers, but these are not. These might be fast battleships, but they're not really fast battleships as they should be built for World War II, in my opinion. But they are built with the treaties in mind, and that's the trouble. And the problem is when you're facing off against an Alaska class heavy cruiser, which is a proper heavy cruiser, is she actually has a thicker main belt, but it does cover less proportion of the hull when it goes going thin down to 5-inch. Slope to 10 degrees though. Slightly thinner deck, but she has a weather deck above the armor deck and a splinter deck. This is a tough one. My instinct is that 9 12-inch guns to 8 13-inch guns, that the 13-inch guns of the Dunkirk, which are also 50 caliber, and again, the Alaska has to go broadside to get all her guns to bear, whereas the Dunkirk can do it forward-facing. Dunkirk's top speed 29 knots, let's say, in practice. The Alaska's top speed 33 knots. So the Alaska can dictate things because it's got a 4-knot advantage. I'd say the Alaska will probably win, but I don't think it'll be an easy fight. They are quite well matched. The main reason it's going to win is not because of its 12-inch versus 13-inch gun. It's going to win because it's 4-inch, 4 knots speed advantage, and the fact it can probably use that to give itself enough distance to be able to choose when it's firing and choose when it's receiving fire. But it's not going to be easy. Hello there, Gracious. Oh, hello. Good to see you. Thank you. Virtual, what's wrong with the superstructure? The original Dunkirk design? What's right about it? It's interesting. Doc, do you think the 13-inch were good enough for a modern unit? Not really, but there again, I don't really like the 14-inch for a modern unit. And I consider the 14-inch definitely to be the entry level for a World War II unit. And I don't really think they're good enough. I think in nicest way, entry level really in World War II is 15-inch. I'd say if you don't have 15-inch, you probably are not going to matter much as a battleship. And the reason the German ones, which are about 15-inch, matter as much as they do is because that's what they have, and they're more powerful than the cruisers, etc. Say, Jerome's, how much weight could Nelson have saved if they ditched torpedoes, and what could that weight have been used for? Not as much weight as they needed, but they could have saved some weight. And I personally had to use that for boilers, but it's not going to save as much weight as you'd think. You've already got 1,200 tons down there. If you take off the torpedoes, you can probably use that. You could probably use that extra weight because that's going to be an extra couple hundred tons, probably. So it's 1,400 tons. So you could probably use that to get yourself an extra shaft. Can you get an extra shaft turbine unit and boilers for 1,400 tons? Hey, it'll be interesting. Assuming the US and Japan let them have 6 Nelson Wells. Well, that's the point. Basically, what I'm saying is, if under some sort of treaty scenario they did get 6, then the Royal Navy would have been very, very happy. I still think, in nicest way, if the British politicians managed to get the Royal Navy all 6 variants of NelRods, and the US Navy would be crying at Congress going, "You're evil! You've tortured us! You've destroyed us!" Bad enough though, they're all never getting two. Honestly, I think the Dunkirk class would be fine against the Scharnhorst, and fine against the Deutschland class, and fine against the Trentos, which is what they were designed for. They're the most punch-down battleships ever designed, really. And yes, they're fast battleships, but this is the trouble. They're so punched down in their orientation, and they are fast battleships, that I can understand why some people decide to try and call them battle cruisers, although they're not battle cruisers. Cruisers. Mm-hmm. I was asking, Dunkirk is actually one of the nicest looking French battleships. I know the composition is really lacking, but still. Okay, I'll settle for that. Time for Dunkirk. So, were Dunkirk's the first to have oil-cooled magazines? Not particularly were they first used the oil as the barrier between them and between the magazines and the boiler rooms. But it's one of the ideas you have to sort of start thinking about what are you going to put between the two. Myself, most of the Royal Navy preferred not to put the oil between the magazines and the boiler rooms. There was just that Royal Navy perspective of. So, boiler rooms can go bang if something goes wrong in the engines, because let's be honest, it's a controlled steam explosion. Magazines can go bang if something goes wrong with the explosives. You want me to stick something explosive between two, fiery between the two? Really? You do? You do? You're absolutely sure you do? Can I stick a lot of armor around it? Yes. Oh, thank you. I don't know my job. Well, sure. Just seen it a few days since I saw someone call the Alaskas battle cruisers. They're not. They're heavy cruisers. Oh, no, sorry. Is there a big difference in reload with Dunkirk and Alaska? Not as big as you'd think. That was pretty much the same. Richards also tried turmeric. Interesting. Turmeric going is seriously there. See, Richards, were French boilers any good? Because 107,000 shot horsepower for 29 knots. Tiger had less horsepower, still made 29. Let's put it this way: it's not the okay. If we go quickly back to them, just quickly to answer the question on Dunkerques, it's not the so for they have 107,000 shaft horsepower installed with 6 indirect boilers. So they have 6 boilers to generate that shaft horsepower. They then have their hull design and their hull shaping and issues with that. But whilst they have 4 screws and 4 geared steam turbines that they supply, they have a small problem. And it's a very, very small problem, but it has an impact on things. And the impact is those steam turbines are incredibly inefficient when compared to, how do I put this, other options available. Because they are supplied by 4 Parsons geared steam turbines. each driving 4 3-bladed screws, and 4 4-bladed screws for Strasbourg. Strasbourg, it worked out better. Why are they incredibly inefficient though? Because they're designed for the same style. That the French basically go to Parsons and go, "What do you have?" And Parsons look at them funny and go, "Well, we have these sets we can sell you. We'll take them, but don't you want to order something specialist for your battleship? No, we'll take those off the shelf." You sure? Yeah, but they're cruiser sets, which are slightly different designs. There's a whole discussion about and there's a whole discussion debate. Ends up they get systems which Parsons puts together for them, but even Parsons are sitting there. The Royal Navy is afterwards talking to Parsons and going, "So you give them the French good stuff," and the Parsons are going, "We could have given them a lot better stuff without upsetting you," and they didn't want it. But on speed test, Dunkirk did reach a maximum speed of 31 knots, and Strasbourg made 30.9 knots. Strasbourg could develop 131,960 shaft horsepower, and Dunkirk developed 135,585 shaft horsepower. This is on speed. This is on their speed tests. It wasn't what they normally did, because the combination of the boilers, the particular Parsons turbines they had, etc. And I'm going by this on. I have to admit, the records I'm using to discuss them are a notebook I have there on my dad, who made it because he was going through the Admiralty archives, and he was basically translating what engineers and what was saying. I haven't looked through that document myself, but I've got it on listen to go back and. But it's always made me quite fun. Made it quite funny going through that. And you can, if you go to the British archives, you can go through some of the Parsons reports and some of the John Brown reports, older Brown reports, on what they're supplying to other nations, and they're just going. There's a Brown report where they're discussing what they are supposed to be supplying under license to the Americans, and they're going. Our only assumption is that they do not feel they have the technical capacity to build the more modern units, and that is why they are requesting license to build the less satisfactory older units. Under current climate, the phrase they use is less satisfactory under current climate, older units, and it's some fun history. It's fun stuff to look into. But anyway, get back to the cruisers. So, the Dunkerques. Pretty much the only cruisers built like this. Hey, good lord. Hello, who are you? Sorry, I disappeared for a second, and someone comes in trying to advertise, I don't know, something in the chat. Especially for Shell. Wasn't it the Ben Maishiri fire that made the RN so curious about fuel storage for aircraft? Yes. This is heavy bunker oil, not aviation fuel, even diesel. It needs to be warm to burn, let alone explode. Yeah, but the trouble is, if you have your... Don't take this the wrong way. I wasn't saying explode, I was saying fiery, burny stuff. And when boilers go boom, they do tend to warm everything around them quite a little dramatically. Same with shells when they go boom. Either way, bunker fuel is not exactly everyone's idea of... let's put it this way. It's not what... Again, Royal Navy. If you're trying to design between two highly explosive... Yes, this is less explosive. Yeah, it's not inexplosive. Allergy decision. Good luck with the health issues. Good luck with health. Take care of them. Family first. Strider, power doesn't equal speed. Many other variables. Yes, there are many ones. Hello, Nutty Hack One. I have another question. If Canada wasn't in Commonwealth beside Queen Elizabeth class, well, the so-called upgrade version we voted not to get, what other battleship class would Canada get from the UK and USA? If Canada was buying a battleship and was buying it from America or the UK, they probably end up with something kind of like those built for the South Americans. But again, if it was Canada, they have their own industry, they have all these things. Canada theoretically is one of the few nations which didn't build a battleship, which could have built a battleship if they'd invested in the infrastructure. They certainly have the resources and the material, and they have a fairly skilled seagoing population. If they had built up a navy, etc., they could have built their own battleships. But they didn't want to, and as several people now point out in the chat, they didn't want to pay for that. That's right. The World Warships Plymouth has an all-forward gun design. Yes, it does. However, by chance, do we have info on the more satisfactory newer powertrain? Maybe they had issues? No, it didn't have issues. There are many things which the RN has in this period which have issues, but it wasn't their powertrain. Hearing the concept of that powertrain having issues has made me drop my pancake. That's just terrible. Sorry. I have to admit it. I got challenged to a version of a diet. And I do say version of a diet. Yeah, that's gone on the floor and been down there for a lot. Well, that's not going in now. But yeah, it's picked up now, so I'm not going to mush on the floor. But yeah, I got challenged to a version of a diet where I'm not allowed to eat any carbohydrates other than flatbreads, and I've decided pancakes are flatbreads. After all, that's flat. Yeah, it's flat. So, the Tony class. Well, for them, it's a very simple thing. It's about structuring the ship. So, it's not even the engine power, although that is a factor. It's about structuring the fuel power in the aviation facilities. You stick the aviation facilities aft, you stick the gun firepower forwards, and the engines in the middle. This is basically almost a modern ship, and we can get into this when discussing the modern warships at the end, because I have got some modern warships discussed in this discussion. It's pretty much gone firepower, engines, command and control, aviation facilities. It works. It's a very nice box and a very nice sort of efficiency making design. Myself, and this is only my personal choice, you have to understand, but oh my god, why in the name of all things holy did they choose to make it B turret that goes up? You're already doing this the whole long ship. Make it D. You know, okay, Nelson's and have the excuse they're only keeping the three turrets, they're cramming together in the most space efficient way possible. Fine. I don't like it, but I can understand the logic. But if you're building a 4-turret design, anyway, seriously, why? For Israel, I do wonder whether an all-forward gun design on a cruiser is a good idea from Magazine Goes Boom point of view. That is the problem, because cruisers have a lot less armor on them than a battleship does. Oh, good lord, the raw egg thing. In my defense, I have lost 7 stone in... no, I lost 7 stone in 6 months once. After my PhD, this is the thing. When I'm writing, and this is one of the reasons why I put on the weight I have, you probably noticed it with that thing. When I'm writing and I forget to exercise, I eat while I'm writing. I get very hungry. I don't get tired. I get hungry. So my weight tends to go up. And then once I finish writing and I'm into the research phase of the next work, etc., which is why I've structured around, then I make sure I go to the gym as regularly as I possibly can. Haven't been managing to get to the gym as much as I like to the last couple of weeks, but I'm getting back there. But I've been still doing a lot of exercise. I've managed to average 30,000 steps a day for most of the last 2 weeks. So that's fair. There have been a couple of days which have been washed out, but the rest have been quite good. The turret looks like B's turret got the hiccups. It got something. Could both B and D be super firing? Well, actually, here's the thing. Yes, if you wanted to make it more condensed space, you could make B and D both super firing. Oh, good lord. Yeah. Come on. Canada had the third largest navy in the world at the end of World War II. True, I've often told people that. In the 20s, it was reported that the HMS Hood was fitted with gallisos that could burn bunker fuel. That wouldn't surprise me as well. Considering Chikumu and others sort of fight with Fletcher and 4 escort carriers, doesn't look good for. Oh no, that doesn't look too good on tanks. No, they're not really a good use of the all-forward firepower. And honestly, on a cruiser, the Royal Navy would be looking at it going, why? Maybe on a heavy cruiser, if the Royal Navy had been this is the thing again. If the NelRods had been built as a large class, and then the Royal Navy had been building heavy cruisers, you might well have seen a heavy cruiser county class design come out that shape. As I have been talking about, honestly, I've been doing, and I'm just going to redo the video, or rather, doing an extra video for the Exeter class. And the point is, Exeter and York, the Royal Navy already had a template for building a very efficient design, and they didn't. They could have done, but they didn't for a heavy cruiser. This is just not a good design, in my view. So, destroyers. 155. So, this is going to be fun, because this one I have basically decided, well, there is only really one class of destroyers which can fit into this category. They are British, so I need to explain a bit of their history. Well, Tony class decided for speed. They did have, let's put it this way, they were reasonably efficient hull designs and reasonably fast for their power ratio. Exactly, it would have been so much better if the IJN had triple 8-inch turrets. Yep. 437 Cosimo. It's not last turret D back so far to allow a far higher angle forward. Theoretically, you can do that with the tones, but unfortunately, in practice, the guns couldn't raise up high enough to do that. Honestly, in nicest way, as my dentist regularly tells me, if I got rid of this, I would have a perfect diet. Because I'm quite healthy in terms of, yes, I enjoy burgers and those sort of things, but I don't actually have a lot of, I don't drink alcohol, I don't eat a lot of desserts. I know I have I've been having the pancakes this evening, but they don't sort of, they count, but they don't count in some extent. In that I don't have ice cream and those things, and I'm quite healthy normally, but the bad thing is iron brew, which is why I limit myself to 2 bottles a week now. Warren Cash, the Germans were keen on the rear turrets. Did anyone else consider a rear turret design? I'll be getting into that because I'm doing some stuff on German cruisers. Anyway, this is a Nubian profile drawing done by the lovely David Michael Sanchez, who did it for me a few years ago for a article I was writing on global, but it's up on Global Maritime History now, on HMS Nubian. And it's a good illustration of a tribal class destroyer. In that you see there are the 4.7-inch guns, dun, 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 dun. So it's got an equally distributed firepower. This is because it's an escort ship and it's supposed to provide firepower around to in the skirmish and maneuvers that it could be doing in a melee fight against other enemy destroyers, but also against enemy aircraft, because the 4.7-inch 4.7-inch was supposed to be a general purpose weapon that could deal with both air attacks and surface attacks. Now, we can all agree that the air attack capability of these guns was not exactly brilliant. They were supposed to engage other things trying to... Remember again, they were a result of the false positives of exercises, where in exercises, in a limited time period, you attack the big, sexy target. The big, sexy target is the capital ship or the carrier, which is going to get you the most honor and prestige for sinking. Yay! In real war, you take out whatever you can get your little mitts on. Destroyer, patrol boat, doesn't matter. Go for it. And that's when you realize in real war, oh, yes, in exercises we had to concentrate on defending those things. But in real war, oh, sugar. It's kind of like in exercises, you always hear about the enemy, the SSK managed to sink the American aircraft carrier. And people go, oh, that's amazing. But then they got destroyed themselves. Okay. Well, that might be worth it. But in reality, probably most crews are going to go, well, if I sink a couple of destroyers, then my mates can sink the rest and I'll survive. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to go after the escorts and work their way in. The IJN have the idea that have many turrets for engaging multiple target opponents simultaneously. Maybe derivative from an aviation cruiser. Too much sense? I think it's more sense than they actually had. Dunkerques, was there an RN heavy cruiser design that got shelled after Washington Treaty limited to 8-inch guns? They were working on various 9.2-inch things. And Ethan McKinney, pronunciation Tony. So, this is pretty much the ultimate of the Royal Navy's back pocket cruisers fighting destroyers. Okay, this is what they're shaped for. Next class looks, well, this is of course tribal again. It gives you their features and design. Next class, of course, is the battle class, which is where it comes into. And people go, hang on, they've got all forward guns. Well, first thing you'll notice if you flick between these two designs, I'm going to this in large screen. You have got between deck mounts. If we look at the previous design, these are all upper deck mounts. There is, including in this one, this is an updated one, which shows the twin 4-inch guns that have been put in to replace the X positions 4.7. Now, that's great. What else have you got? So those are heavier mounts to begin with. You also have, in the 1942 battles, you have depth charge rails, squid launchers, potentially if they're replaced by depth charge rails. In the 1943 battles, you have the depth squid launcher fitted at the beginning. You have also a huge 40mm farm. For example, if I go for a 1942 battle, and if you look at the bottom, D17, you are seeing a 1942 battle because that has two twin 4.5-inch guns on a mounting, a single 4 forward between deck, a single 4-inch quick firing on Mark III, only on the first 6 ships, and that 4-inch gun was supposed to primarily fire star shell, but it's amazing how many other shells they found. Then you had 4 twin 40mm Bofor Havesmere mounts, which of course were the radar-guided 40mm mounts, and then between 4 to 6 single 40mm Bofors, as well as 2 quad torpedo tubes for 21-inch torpedoes, depth charge rails, depth charge throwers, and I've said rails were later replaced by the AS mortar. This is quite a big difference than the previous tribal class, which, if we go back to this design, you can see do not have a squid. They do have depth charges, and they have throwers sometimes fitted, but they only have one set of torpedoes. They have the 4.7-inch guns all round, but they don't have the huge 40mm. And this is the thing. The battle class, in many ways, has been designed with a phrase of we have to have the firepower we do as concentrated forward, because that's the very big stuff, the between deck 4.5-inch. And that's the only way we're going to get a 4.5-inch into destroyers, and that's the best gun we can put in them. But that's going to have to go between decks. It's going to take up a lot of space, a lot of weight. We can't afford to put any of them aft, because A, they're expensive and difficult to build, and B, they'll cost us a lot of weight, and they'll take up a lot of space, which means that we won't be able to put in enough of other armaments. And it's in sort of a reflection of the growing role of anti-aircraft firepower, that basically are going, right then. So, your anti-ship primary capability is provided by 8 21-inch torpedoes to be able to launch in the salvo. Woohoo! That's capability. Your anti-lesser surface target capability is your 4.5-inch guns. We know we would prefer you'd have a 4.5-inch guns aft. We would prefer it, but it's going to cost a lot of weight. And honestly, the advantage of having that third twin 4.5-inch between deck mount, between deck rather than upper deck mount aft, versus having all these 40mm radar guided 40mm is not enough, because the radar guided 40mm is going to provide us with a lot of anti-aircraft firepower. So this is not so much we want an all-forward main battery armament, as this is we want to have these weapon systems, and we want to put it in the most efficient way possible. Because again, you can more easily fit 40mm and torpedo launchers, etc., around engineering spaces, and then you leave a lot of space between them and the 4.5-inch ammunition in the magazine. Forgive me, Japanese transliteration doesn't use the following vowel makes long vowel rule from English. That's good. In real war, people tend to remember that if you die a hero, you're still dead. I was asking, there was a Japanese cruiser, the Baljobo, that had a main guard aft, designed to close the formation of 3 cruisers. That's true. What were they thinking, design-wise? Nice again. They had lots of ideas for the battle class because the battle class, look at how heavily built they are. They have to be incredibly heavily built to support the weight of those between deck guns being forward. Those are capital ship weapon systems. I.e., those 4.5-inch guns could have been fitted to HMS Hood. Those 4.5-inch guns could have been fitted to any of the capital ships, aircraft carriers, etc. That's what they're designed for. They're a working design, but they're what's available. And this is what happens when the Royal Navy goes, okay, we have working upper deck designs now. Immediately, the statistics change. Suddenly, well, the weight difference is now reduced. We can still have all these things. We still have all the torpedoes we're previously going to have. Although this is a slightly later design, a modified design where they filled in some of the space with extra things. But, and it used to be between the 2 separate structures, etc., there was another set of torpedoes. As originally built, they had 8 torpedoes. Or 10 torpedoes, was it? 2 quintuple launchers. I think it was 2 quintuple launchers. Going from memory, or was it 2 quadruple launchers? 2 quintuple launchers. Torpedoes. They had lots of twin 40mm. They had all their 4.5s the whole way along the ship because they're upper deck mounts. They're a lot lighter. They take up a lot less space in the hull. They don't really pierce the deck. They just require on the stuff above it. And this is the point. They can afford to be this. And they can afford to have. So the Royal Navy would prefer to have a 4.5-inch gun aft. They really would. That's a lot of firepower. But it's the firepower paradigm of, yes, you can get the 4.5-inch, but it's going to be incredibly heavy. At which point, the balance is 40mm worth of weight, more 40mm worth of weight, or is a 4.5-inch between deck mount worth of weight? You end up going with 40mm because that's quite so much weight. Whereas you can take slightly with the, because basically that's the weight limit of pretty much all those 4 Hazemare mounts. But once you've got the Stag mounts, which are actually heavier than the Hazemares, but you've got the upper deck mounts, you can go down. And Trouble class have an X and Y turret in case they have to go backwards across the North Sea. Yeah, pretty much. The battle doesn't look nearly as pretty as the Daring. Dick, language. And before anyone says that, his name is Richard Richards. He's just going with the British colloquial shortening of Richard. Probably because it's funny and it's making him giggle. And me too. But I have little cousins watching, so language. Thank you. Now, naval guns are pretty deadly when put into a tank. The battle. This is the point I make in this book repeatedly when going through these and the Genesis and the Modern Destroyer. Because please note, this book is not a class history. The amount of people writing and going, you haven't put for a class history, you haven't included the Royal Australian Navy or the Royal Canadian Navy ships, and I go, no, I haven't, because for starters, it's not a class history, but also because, as I've written in here and as I've said many, many times, thanks to COVID, I didn't get to go to Canada, which is why I'm hoping to go this year, and why I'm going this year, and Russia allowing, and Putin couldn't have held it off till next year or anything, could he? Leaving that to one side, stop grousing about Putin affecting your travel plans. Well, yeah, just don't do it. But leaving that to one side, this book is a history of the genesis of the modern destroyer. And I'd like to have included the RAN and the RCN ships, but I didn't go to their archives, so I didn't want to put in other people, basically put in my views based on other people's work in there. It's far better to cite the other people and tell people to go off and read them. Far more honest as well. But yeah, don't worry, Richards. Don't worry. My little cousins do watch this though. It's one of the things I know. It is one of the things I find it funny when it says all the people watching your channel are male, and I'm going, no, because in nicest way I know my cousins are watching. Leave that to one side. Melvin1640, Jess P, and all those other wonderful viewers who chat away with me and chat away on Discord. I know my cousins are watching. And I know they like my things, and they know they watch them all, because they talk back to me about them. So it's always fun when Google's trying to tell me, say, you have 0% female viewers, and I'm going, no, because I know I have at least 12 of them, most lives. This book is about the genesis of the modern destroyer. It's not about these three classes. I'd have liked it to have had more of a class history in there, but for that I would have to visit Australia and have to visit Canada. Yeah, that's exactly one. So here are some more ideas. And I thought you'd enjoy this section because, well, I enjoyed this section. Yeah, that's the only reason I mentioned it, because I have 12 under 14s who watch my shows, and I'm related to them all, and in the nicest way, that their mums get upset, they complain to their mums, who complain to my mum, who then complains at me. So yeah. Oh. Senator, I have to say, Doc, I thoroughly enjoyed your book. It answered many questions, some of which I didn't know I had before I read it. I'm glad about that. Forgot the Ricklers. Well, no, the Ricklers aren't forgotten. I haven't put them in yet because they come up at the end. They're going to be discussed at the end. I do have some designs from them though. Yeah. Because again, the actual description of the thing was the Nelson's, Dunkerques, Tones, and Battles. So I put all them in the main stuff, and the Rickaloos are added in at the end. Ay, caramba. What? How have you done that? Right. For some reason, it has managed to lose the next slide. So I will add All the slides again. Why did it lose those? Anyway. So we haven't done the Rickaloos yet, and there is a reason we haven't done the Rickaloos. But let's start off this. Forward armament doesn't go out that quickly. You also have the lovely idea for converting an hour class into a hybrid carrier battleship. We can all enjoy looking at that. Actually, this is going to sound strange. This is actually one of the saner designs I've seen for that as an option. I'm not quite sure about the Katabar idea, but it's an option. It certainly is. And it's an idea. Would I actually build a ship like it? Well, no, but the Russians did. Of course, and we're going to get them. Okay, little cousins sound off in chat. They're not allowed to do that. They've been told they're not. Not until they're 16. They're allowed to start sounding off once they're 16. They've been told by their parents. So you'll know when they turn 16. Hopefully you're all still watching when they are, and then you'll start getting messages. You'll be able to tell my cousins. Read naval guns on tanks. An HE shell for Leo 2 weighs 16 kilograms. A shell for tribals is 22.7 kilograms. Both are 120mm forward 7-inch. Not all guns are equal. Yeah, this is why you have to worry about it. No, I know. Don't worry about it. Yeah, it's the American carrier battleship hybrid. Yeah, I thought you'd all like me predicting this one now. Anyway, it's an all-forward gun arrangement. And now we're going to talk about the modern Navy. And I'm going to end up... basically, I've saved the Rickaloo for the summaries. Can't think why. It just seems sensible. And it just seemed like a good idea to save the Rickaloos for the summary. That ship just looks stupid. No, they all sighted Ironborough a lot earlier in the 16. Goodness gracious me! In my family, you start whiskey. Oh, good lord! Yeah, it's always fun when our American branch comes to the UK and meets the British branch. They just go, "What the hell? You have that? Yes." We do. So, now, the UK modern Royal Navy, and this is an interesting thing to talk about the modern Royal Navy, but one of the things I thought I'd bring up is, again, if we look at this ship, 2 of their ships on here, they are, of course, all forward. And it's not just the British, it's also the Russians and other nations do this. Look, the Moskva class, all forward. There is an efficiency there. The engines and the command and controls in the center, the aviation's aft, the weapons are forward. Kind of like the Turner class. And it makes sense. It really does. Oh, good lord, not again. Moskva class. The Moskva class are, this is the thing. This is the Russians building what is really, in many ways, the first of their heavy aviation cruisers. But it's anti-submarine warfare orientated. It carries a lot of helicopters for ASW, but it also carries a significant firepower in terms of missiles and weapon systems forward. So it's a major component of the task group. Dunkerques. On the bright side, they could provide amphibious fire support. I presume you mean the Iowa conversion here. And yeah, it can provide a lot of things. VCH, that ship just looks stupid. No, it's not stupid. It just looks like it doesn't really know what it's an answer to. Then there's the Type 42 Sheffields. Again, this is a British design. Now, of course, the Type 82 had weapon systems both end, but the moment you design the Type 42s, well, you want a hangar and a flight deck. Well, that's going to be your aft. And forward, you've got your Sea Dart, and you've got your 4.5-inch gun. Got a Phalanx post-Falklands War put in there, but you also got some 30mm. And this, again, forward for weaponries. You keep the magazines forward so they can be kept as far away from the engines as possible, so they can be kept cool. Because, again, missile electronics do not like heat either. This might shock some people, but missiles don't like heat either. And engines, and then aviation. Kievs, the modified Kievs, because you know what? When you see this and you're Russian, you think, oh, that's an idea. Oh, that's sexy. I can build something like that. Now, this could well be because of the amount of vodka they were drinking at the time, but this is what they built. The Kievs and the modified Kievs. And let's be honest, there is something quite wrong, but also in a very dirty way about those Kievs. They are just... There is something about them. It's almost so wrong it's right. Now, admittedly, they could probably be better if they'd actually had Sea Harriers rather than the... Oh, good lord, don't get me started on the Russian pistol aircraft. But leaving that to one side, they are an interesting idea. They are definitely an interesting capability, and they're quite scary for the Western nations to try and work out how to deal with. Because are you dealing with it as another Russian heavy missile cruiser? Are you dealing with an aviation ship? It gives Russian task groups suddenly a organic air defense. And again, there's the point that's often made about from World War II experience. Carrier battle group air defense doesn't have to be provided by the world's best aircraft to be effective. There is no historian out there who's going to be arguing that the Fulmar was the world's best fighter aircraft in 1940, 1941. But there is also should be no historian who's actually done the research and legitimately looked into the incidents in the Mediterranean who would then be arguing that they weren't an effective air defense layer for the fleet, for the carriers and the battle groups operating with them in that period. They were very effective for protecting the Royal Navy in terms of air defense when they needed to be. So they weren't the world's best fighter, but they were still effective at doing the job because you had the support of the ships, and what were they there to do? The enemy was coming to them, so they could be orientated around that way. Finish VCH. I served on Knox class, which was weapons forward, ASW helicopter support aft. Same thing, only about 3,000 tons displacement. Yep. Dunkerques, Type 42 Falklands. What went wrong? So many things. But honestly, the real thing that went wrong in the Falklands? No airborne early warning. No airborne early warning. That's the problem. Richards, I'm not quite sure a $2,000 suicide drone will take out a ship. I think there's a difference. We have to draw a difference between what could be a mission kill, i.e., taking out the sensors, the radars, etc. of a ship, versus actually sinking the ship. And I think that's the probability. That's the problem. We're going to have to design into ships redundancy and capability to survive being possibly impacted by these small weapons. And there's also a thing of we might well have to start festooning them with 40mm again. It's just the point you could end up with, or various other weapon systems. Again, once you start using energy systems that disable drones, then someone's going to start developing a shielded drone, which is going to be more expensive than regular drone, but it's going to get through, which is why you're going to have to go with actual kinetic kill systems or lasers, if you can get the lasers to actually work. And that's going to cause them to go up, and then you're going to have to try and work out how to make your drones survive against them. You're either going to go for numbers, or you're going to go for slightly more survivable, slightly faster, which will again be more expensive. It just starts off the cycle again. That's what it is. I keep trying to explain to things. Ship development is a cycle, and of course I've been causing a lot of fun with the torpedo boat destroyer, then the torpedo boat destroyer, then the torpedo boat destroyer, then the torpedo boat destroyer, and that's what happens until someone comes up with something which replaces the torpedo boat at the bottom. And then we have the Type 23 Duke class, without which the Royal Navy would probably cease to exist as we speak of it. I love them. My dad, of course, built several of them. All his ones could actually take a Merlin landing on them. He did have an argument about their VLS. He always thought they should be slightly longer and have a second VLS aft. He felt that if you made it slightly longer and put in another 32 cell Seawolf VLS aft, you'd have a far more capable vessel, and upgrade the harpoons to about 16 when they've been built. But no, they've gone. This is the design they've kept with, and it's been a fairly efficient, fairly proficient frigate design for many, many years. All the weapons are up front. Let's be honest. There's a 4.5-inch gun, Seawolf, harpoon, all up front. There's a 30mm gun either side back here, but that's it. And then it's just mini guns for various things put over the rest of it. Engines underneath the boilers, underneath the stack, and stuff down here. Command and control systems, and then flight deck and all those facilities. I do teach the people the Falklands War a lot, and yeah, there's going to be an anniversary conference at King's, which I'll probably be taking part in online, which people can book into. Another guy, hello. The Kiev makes think the Soviet designers were spiking their vodka with something much stronger. Who knows? That's right. The first idea is oh, nice secret room. The Yak 38 Forger was terrible. Yeah, it was just terrible. I was trying not to say its name. I'm not I'm not getting into the ferry battle, but again, that's a light strike aircraft. That's not a fighter. Dunkerques, my computer doesn't like heat either. My room is well insulated, and during summer it gets hot if the shades are not down. I have all the sunlight in the afternoon, and I have a large window. Ooh. Dunkerques, is mission kill the golden asymmetric warfare? Often. It doesn't matter. Getting a kill is going to... Let's put it this way. There is a lot more effort required to get a kill of a ship than to get a mission kill of a ship. A lot more effort. And that's often a problem as well, because therefore it's going to sound strange, especially in grey zone operations, when you're not in a war, but you're... It's far easier to dress up a mission kill as an accident, or to slip a mission kill through in a deniable way. Oh, a random civilian drone just hit your radars. Fudge. Well, who was flying that? It might well be a made in China drone, but it's a commercial drone which anyone in the world could have bought, and there isn't much of it surviving that actually can be used to identify which particular serial number it is. Oh, it was bought for cash, or cash, or something else. Some other undeniable currency on the black on the dark web. Oh, great! That's just going to cause trouble, isn't it? Who's going to prove what? Richards, yeah, I've had this conversation, the same conversation with those same analysts. It's fun times. AFAB, helicopter counts weapon system and it's aft. Yeah, but it's its own weapon system in many ways. That's aviation support facilities. I've actually had the conversation with those analysts. They're fun. Thank you, Walt92. Hurricanes work well. Yes, again, the Hurricanes worked very well, but we always hear about the Spitfire. Well, again, that's, as Calvin Gadsworth pointed out, there's also ECM and all those things. And again, there is something interesting that I would point out in ECM gear. And I have been working on this quite recently, is I have realized that to an extent the navies have been keeping up with electronic warfare far more in the West than their other services have for some reason. It seems to me whenever I'm sort of in the conversations, the electronic warfare, and this is in the publicly available conversations, the electronic warfare coming from the navies is really quite high up there in importance, whereas in the other services they haven't done as much. But I'm open to being corrected on that one. So here you go. Now, admittedly, this does have a gun sitting aft and above the flight deck, so we can argue that that does give her some armaments back. But let's be honest, the main armament is forward, and the main armament of the Peter Vielecki is those missiles, all those missiles, and that is then nuclear reactor underneath there. Power goes out that way, and all those missiles stored forward. Yeah. Ooh. Rakesh, someone should make unmanned swordfish drones. I think Drax already suggested that in bilge pumps. And it's an interesting design, the Peter Vielecki. Type 45 Daring class. Again. All the weapon systems, the major weapon systems are forward. Phalanx goes about here. 30mm there. Aircraft facilities aft. Missiles, all the heavy weapons forward. It's almost that the all forward armament has become the modern system. Admittedly, though, because these weapons are very flexible, there's no blind spot for missiles. They can pop up and go round the back of the ship and come after you, so it doesn't matter where you put them to an extent. Well, there is a reason why I put it. This is a Kirov class cruiser. It tends to be called a battle cruiser by some because it is 20-odd thousand tons, and it's nuclear powered. I would argue heavy cruiser more than battle cruiser because it's still a lot lighter. In fact, roughly half the displacement of the hood. So I would say it's not in battle cruiser territory yet. But Somewhat. BJTouron is saying that somewhat is all forward to big guns and missiles. Yep. Would heavy seas hinder the all forward weapons usage? Well, again, I would point out with some designs, perhaps, but with the Royal Navy one, of course, they're in this kind of, as well as having the hull itself and the height, the amount of water that gives it, they also have this sort of protective box around them and are raised up some more to try and protect them. So they should be okay. And so we have the summary. Roughly right on time for when I was writing the unit. And we have the recluse. Now, I think this class is possibly some of the most interesting in terms of designs. But, let's see. That's not expanded that well for some reason. No idea why. Why have you decided to be so bad at expanding? Okay, so they are, of course, armed with 8 15-inch guns in quadruple turrets and 9 6-inch in triple turrets. So they have a broadside each of 8 15-inch and 8 15s and 6 6-inch. I would say myself that these ships, which are theoretically 35,000 tons standard displacement, are far better designed and far more capable than their Dunkirque counterparts. But, and I say this in the nicest way, from a loving place. And it is from a loving place. They're nowhere near as capable as they could have been. Yes, they've got a 32 knot speed. And yes, they are designed in many ways with the concept of taking on the Littorios, which of course have their own 9 15-inch guns. I myself, if I had to pick to be in a fight in one or the other, I would probably be in a Littorio. This is despite liking the all-forward firepower, and this is despite that angle and area of fire. So they've got very good coverage. Mainly because the quadruple turrets for the French were notoriously difficult. And I think they could have gone with a treble turret formation, and I think they could have gone for a very good treble turret formation, kind of like the Nelson class. And then they'd have got 9 15-inch guns, going 15 over 16, and 3 treble turrets, like I usually like to position them. An A, a B on the same level, and then a C, which is higher, I think would have given them a lot more capability and would have made them far, far more dangerous than the Littorios. As it is, they end up with 2 quadruple turrets which keep having issues the whole time they're in service. As quadruple turrets are often do, and yes, they are technically they're more their turrets are more double twins rather than quadruples because of the way they're grouped together to protect, etc. But seriously, doesn't work that well. And as Avfab's pointed out, the 6-inch turrets are perilously close to being wing turrets. They're secondaries. That's not quite wing turrets, but is certainly interesting. And the 6-inch coverage is not as good as the 15-inch coverage. And also, if you did put the treble, 15s, you probably have improved the coverage of your 15-inch guns. Russia can't really afford 2 Kirovs. Not at the moment. Well, they can if they really want to, but it depends. Russia's economy is very much dependent on the price of gas gas and oil. And you always have to remember, as long as someone's still buying gas and oil from them, they're still probably paying the same price internationally because it's an international price. And therefore, if the gas and oil prices go up because people are putting sanctions on them and not buying from them, which artificially reduces the supply elsewhere in the world because people are diverting their procurement to other sources of supply and are paying premiums to get that supply from there, then other people who aren't getting their supply from those other sources now because those other sources are supplying, let's say, Western nations putting sanctions on Russia, those other people are going to have to buy from Russia, are probably going to be buying from Russia, unless America and other nations dramatically increase their output of oil and gas. Sorry, gas economics. Why does the proposed gas going to chemical subclass directly abandon the all-4 turret? Pretty much because of once you start going into more than 2 turrets, people start getting iffy about putting where you're putting the third one. Because they start to worry about, hang on, what happens if one hit disables all our turrets because they hit the magazine? Which, in the nicest way, and I put this point of view, and I say this with all due love and respect to the designers in the 1920s and 30s. If a 16-inch shell penetrates all the way through your armor into your magazine, it doesn't matter whether that magazine supplies 3 turrets, or 2 turrets, or 1 turret. The odds of your ship surviving are very, very low. Because the odds are that's going to take up all your propellant, and a good number of your shell charges will possibly go with it when it goes off. In which case, you will have an explosion which is probably not going to be too far off a conventional version of a nuclear bomb in power, which is probably going to wreck your ship. Just a small polite phrase. So, yes, I know there's this battle survivability thing. You're going, we're putting all our eggs in one basket. But it doesn't really matter putting all your eggs in one basket, because if that particular basket is hit, it doesn't matter how big that basket is, that's going to be a problem. And the thing is, if they're all together, you can put thicker armor around them. Shorter than they're supposed to be armored. Even again, is it designed to fulfill a traditional cruiser role? I would argue with the Kirovs. They are designed more around the cruiser role of sailing around the world independently, hosting the flag, than they are around the battleship role. They're basically a statement. We can send one ship, and that's got a lot of firepower in it, so you have to take notice of it. All Russia's nuclear-powered ships are pretty much present ships in terms of global presence, especially once they're nuclear-powered. It's basically a case of, we can send this around the world without having to have fuel bases, etc. We only have to stop in ports to pick up food. Virtual, what is inside the structure between the aft 6-inch turrets? They could have removed that and only have 2 6-inch turrets to flying position. We've kept the broadside capability and save a few dozen tons. That structure in between them is the hangar for the aircraft. Now, you could have modified that and stuck in some sort of lift and stored the aircraft down below, but they have a sort of hangar facility, etc., and storage for the aircraft there. Right then, I'm just sorry I'm not talking, but I'm reading the questions and trying to keep up and find ones which I'm supposed, because this conversation is going with each other. And then there's as far as most 16 to 18 shells are duds, right? Not really, but in the nicest way, they can sustain a lot. Sometimes the most damage they cause is because of their only kinetic energy impact, not because of themselves actually exploding. And sometimes if they don't hit, they just miss. That's the whole reason you're firing a salvo. You know, this afternoon I was firing away quite merrily with my 15-inch guns, and I got 25% hits from the guns. 18-inch guns, and I was getting 25% hits, which sounds really good. But once you start to realize that at the ranges it got down to at the end on UAD, I was pretty much shooting at point blank range and getting 100% hits for a salvo because of the range. You then realize that, hang on, at most hit ranges, I was not getting 25%. I was not getting 25% hits. I was getting a lot less. And that's a video which is coming out in a couple of weeks, which is basically my 18-inch Agincourt taking on the Bismarck, and we see which one would win in a one-on-one duel. And I've almost considered doing a one-on-two duel with her, because she kind of ripped the Bismarck to pieces. And I mean, I built the Bismarck as accurately as I could on UAD. And the 18-inch armed version Queen Elizabeth class battleship Agincourt of my thought process of it, I think of it, kind of took her to pieces with 6 18-inch guns. Dunkerques. Can we not do the Cold War thing? Had enough of that watching Daddy go off in his V-bomber refueling Victor. Tanif, he was a Victor? I feel sorry for you. Mine was on Vulcans. That's always the fun thing about my dad. He does his stuff on Navigator and Vulcans. Yeah, just a case of, really, Dad? You're naval architect and you did your sign? Yeah! Nice, well, they needed the people who were good at maths so they could find where they were supposed to go. But yeah, Vulcans. Cool Dad Award. AFAB, almost the only battleship design worth upgrading. Hang on the back for halos and us. It could have been worth upgrading if it wasn't for the forward guns. Honestly, that turret design, no. Historically, 3% to 5% was powerful goals. Yes, that's usually what you're hitting. As I said, that's what you hit at normal ranges. In a UAD, it's pretty accurate. That is about 3 to 5%. But as said, well, you see, one of those 18-inch shells disabled Bismarck's ability to move. At which point, someone being particularly nice and friendly decided to approach from behind on the Bismarck, because that 18-inch shell had also stopped her ability to not only stopped her ability to move, but stopped her being able to actually fire one of her rear turrets, and soon disabled her second rear turret. And so she couldn't turn around and couldn't really move to fire her forward turrets at me, so I was getting got very close with the 18-inch guns. It wasn't nice. So, what have we got coming up? Next week we have the Norfolk class counties. On Sunday we have the next patron, which is going to be the patron discussing the US Coast Guard, which I am still writing. It's the only one I haven't actually written of the ones I've got coming up next week. That coming up in the next couple of weeks. And it's fun. So, I'm going to say thank you to everyone for watching. I'm going to keep on, going to be on for at least another couple of minutes while I'll finish off questions and answers. But I'm going to say thank you very much for watching now. Thank you to everyone who subscribed. Thank you to everyone who shares the videos. Thank you to everyone who just watches the videos. Thank you to everyone who likes the videos. Thank you to everyone who has joined Patreon. Is going to be suggesting topics because that's going to go live this weekend. The Patreon suggestions for March. And thank you to everyone who has joined the channel. They didn't want to join Patreon, but they get all these lovely little emojis and things and badges. And thank you to everyone who has, of course, supported the Hyder trip, because that's very, very kind of you. Thank you. Nice to hear it. So an 18-inch will do the clover as well. Yeah. But the reality, as I understand it, is this. Honestly, Germany would probably still have been stuck with 15-inch guns. Because the reason they go with the 11-inch guns on the Scharnhorst, on the Deutschlands and the Scharnhorst, is because those are what they have built, and then they work up to a 15-inch gun. So that's probably would still say the same. But if you have 18-inch gun ships at the end of World War I in service with the Royal Navy, the odds are the US Navy's building some 18-inch ships, and the odds are the Japanese are trying to build 18-inch ships. And then you would see a really very big difference. Thank you, Vision. Very big difference between the navies of the first-rate powers and the second-rate powers, as I'd call it. So if we go back to this treaty, if this says instead of up to 16-inch guns, you're allowed up to 18-inch guns, the odds are the IJN, the USN, and the RN have 18-inch guns in service, and 18-inch gun battleships. They are going to be incredibly more powerful. They're also going to need to be bigger, so you're probably going to have to set limit at 45,000 tons. That's honestly where you'd probably be setting it for 18-inch gunships. You'd probably be adding an extra 10,000 tons on. If you're setting that as your limit and you're allowed 18-inch gunships, there's no point having 12-inch gunships. There's no point having. You have immediately made the Italian. Think about this from World War II perspective. Okay, yes, the big three navies all have 18-inch gunships. Why would the Germans the Germans have to because of their own process? But why would the Italians, who could spend that time building up their developing guns, why would they still be fielding a 15-inch gun on the Littorios? They've probably been 18-inch gunships. The French, because they're in the same place as the Germans, would probably still be stuck. In which case, the French Navy's battleships would be everyone looking at it going, "Oh, you fielded a 13-inch gunship? Oh, that's cute." It just changes things dramatically. So yes, whilst fighting Bismarck is probably still would have been historically accurate, and is a good reference point, you cannot, if the Royal Navy has 18-inch gunships in service, you cannot predict what the US Navy and the IJN would have in service by World War II. Especially when you start going through and think, well, okay, well, if the Royal Navy is still building Nelson and Rodney and allowed to build NelRods after then, imagine if the Royal Navy does build, well, pretty much this with 18-inch guns as it had. This is what Nelson Rodney could be, a 45,000-ton version of this with 18-inch guns. Think about that. Build it on UAD if you want, and I'll look at the pictures. If you send them through to me on Discord, I will do a thing of comparing the pictures and your design stats for them if you want to put them together as slides. I really love doing that and a little sort of write up. But that is the world you're dealing with, and it's not really as what if history as we might presume, because we know the British have an 18-inch gun program. We know they have a Mark 1 and a Mark 2 gun. We know they're working on a 45 caliber for the N3. I wouldn't be surprised to hear that if the original Mark 1 was a 42 caliber, which would have been a battleship gun, and that could have worked for Agincourt. If you have Agincourt comes out and it's got 6 18-inch 42s and 28 knots, that's going to change the world. That will be another dreadnought moment, and that would have been in the middle of World War One. And just imagine the effect on the German Navy. Ryan Cash, thank you, Dr. Clarke. Great distraction from mentioned events, and thanks everyone in chat. Stay safe. So that's my view. That's what I'm doing this for. Stay safe, everyone. Derek Oscar, the US built an 18-inch cannon, and the Japanese actually built 2 18-inch battleships. Yes. So imagine if again, there is a difference though if the Royal Navy has 18-inch battleships in service before the Washington Treaty. If they're in service by the time this treaty is signed, and again, as I said, Agincourt, Hood would have been 18-inch ships. Whatever Hood turned out to be would have been an 18-inch design. She might have had 8 18-inch guns. And that's not really fair, because even battlecruiser with 8 18-inch guns is probably going to slam an 8 15-inch gunship, because they're going to have a similar rate of fire. In fact, probably pretty much the same rate of fire in terms of their gun operating speed. And yes, whilst the 15-inch battleship is probably going to be strong, if it's Bismarck, it changes things. How you armor a battlecruiser which has 18-inch guns is different than how you armor a battlecruiser which has 15-inch guns. How you shape and strengthen the hull, because it's got to be stronger to take the pounding of its own guns, for starters. And again, I would point out something else. There's the Washington Treaty. The British are never going to scrap Hood. They are not going to scrap it. Again, if the British have 18-inch battleships, Queen Elizabeth class, Agincourt, and a Hood, and maybe a Hood sister, because in nicest way, if they're building 18-inch ships, they're probably far faster building them than with 15-inch ships, would they keep playing around with the design of. Especially if they only have one in service, because remember, one is equal to none. For them to have the capability guaranteed, they need at least 3 18-inch ships in service. They are, and honestly, Hood class might have turned out to be an improved Agincourt with 18-inch guns. They would have churned them out. They'd have had them in service. You go and turn around to the Royal Navy going, well, you have to try. You don't have any 16-inch ships, and you're going to have to lose all your 18-inch ships. Nope. US Navies probably would have started building an 18-inch ship in response to the British having 18-inch ships. Japan would be. They're not going to drop. So that's the thing. The reason, no one, people talk about them dropping down to 15-inch because, that's the most common battleship in service gun at time, and that's not going to happen. The Americans and Japanese aren't going to drop down from 16 to 15. Why would the British drop down from? Why would they drop down from 18? They're not going to. So that would have come into the treaty, and again, it's not going away. And it would have been an all-forward arrangement, literally because for the same reason the G3s were. If we go back to these sort of designs, the G3s and N3s were all-forward arrangements because it was the most efficient hull space usage to use the existing infrastructure. And 18-inch guns do require more space. I come. Hope the scouts had fun. I had fun on the scouts this evening. Did it. Thank you to Strasbourg. Any support is welcome, as I always say. Thank you for anything. And that's the Italian fleet would be obsolete. They'd be building new ships. They wouldn't. In nicest way, there'd be a case of we can upgrade our 12-inch battleships. We can. Wonderful. How? What are they building? 18-inch. Oh frick! Right then. No. Bye bye. That's a whole new ship class we need. Mitchell notes, bigger guns require bigger ships, and bigger ships require bigger docks, all of which require bigger budgets. Pretty much. I never think the 20-inch would be common, as they are horrifically slow in concept and volume with fire. It's far better at that point, I think. Yeah, 18-inch is the largest, really practical one. Thank you, Thatcher, to Vishal. Dunkerques, the Germans would be having the biggest sugar moments, and maybe a little something comes out of it as well when they do. If HMS Agincourt existed, yeah. If HMS Agincourt existed, and here's the other thing: if HMS Agincourt existed, and this is the real fun thing. Okay, she would have been ordered. She would have ordered at the same time as the first R class. Now, the first R class don't make it to Jutland, but again, if you're building her and really pushing along, and as much as Jellicoe would have liked, if they pushed it along, you could have probably had an 18-inch Agincourt in service by the time of Jutland. And imagine if 18-inch Agincourt had been at Jellicoe's disposal, because there's no way he would let that ship go anywhere other than be his flagship at Jutland. There are probably a few more German ships sunk at the bottom of the North Sea, because they'd be looking and going, that looks like a regular Queen Elizabeth class, but why has it got only 3 turrets rather than 4? We can't. What's going on? Boom! Oh, good God! They've got Agincourt. Because if you think about some of the older dreadnoughts that were at Jutland, an 18-inch gun ship is the shells at the ranges they're engaging will go straight through their armor. My point of view is no one. Lightning's Vulcans went far without victors. Yeah, I know. That's from. Yeah. I haven't heard from any friends in that region in about a week. So, yeah. As said, we're going to be getting into that with on Monday recording, and it's going to come out Wednesday. Bilge pumps with Wilfred Owen, and you couldn't have anyone better on ground warfare than Wilf. If you look up Wilfred Owen and look up all the stuff he does on ground warfare, you will not find a better expert. Honestly, this is one of the things we love with Bilge Pumps. We managed to get some really cool people on there. We had Sal on this week to talk about infrastructure, and you can't get better than Sal Merker infrastructure. And we've got Wilf on next week, and it's just a case of, yeah. And we're going to try and get Prof. Lambert on as well soon. Mission, I would love a video on the design of an 18-inch battlecruiser versus an 18-inch battleship. Could be fun. Vision, the USN could have gone for twin 18-inch in the South Dakota instead of triple 16-inch. Oh, they could have done. Carmen, I'm thinking of spending extra night after conference in Manchester. What's the best museum there to go to? Well, there's the Imperial War Museum North, but honestly, I wasn't that big a fan. Hard Rock Cafe, though, definitely worth a visit. Not sure. Revengers at Jutland. Yeah. So, Agincourt being at Jutland is a realistic scenario, yes. where can these Argentcore specs be found? I've done videos about her. I have done videos. You can type Argentcore into my channel search and you'll find some details. And as said, there is a recording of a battle video coming up soon. Right. Thank you very much, everyone. The comment, read Land Warfare and Bullet Can you send me the notes if you don't mind? Well, bilge pumps is, of course, downloadable at any point, so you don't have to worry about it. But I can send you the podcast link. It's a podcast, so you can listen to it in your ear. We do it as a podcast, so you can basically stick it in your ears and listen to it while you're driving. Quite a lot of people do seem to listen to bilge pumps while they're driving, or with their children, again, which worries us. We seem to be bilge pumps seem to be very popular with the under 12 crowd. We have no idea why. It's not our target audience at all, but we seem to have a large number of under 12s who enjoy bilge pumps. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone. I am now going to go and take the doggy for a wander. And hope you have a nice evening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for all the support. And take care. And don't worry, I will visit HMS Trincomalee as soon as I can. I have a lot of plans of places I'd like to visit. Hyder is going to be first this year, but also I plan on doing a video of HMS Warrior at some point this video. Take care. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Tisransful. Thank you, Australian. Thank you, Bud Guy 8829. Thank you, Night 6831. Thank you, Zachary Gherkin, Darius Radatsky, Rick Sava, Dick Richards, Jack Ray. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Carl Harmon. Thank you, Dan, for doing your lovely job adminning. Thank you, Bijan, for proposing this topic. Thank you, DGB40, Jonathan Burrow, Thomas Edenlifer. Thank you, Greg Sarski, and 35 Benvids. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Jonathan Burrow, Peter Dawson. Thank you, Mitchell Oates. Thank you, Roland Cash. Thank you, Strider. Thank you, Tanivelka, of course. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I hope you've enjoyed it. And I hope I've thanked everyone. Anyone I haven't thanked, please feel thanked. Wolf92, thank you, of course. And thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a nice evening. And hope you enjoyed it. Take care.